So hi everyone, welcome to Abuse on Men. This is part of a three-part series, which is comparing abuse on men versus abuse on women. I'm joined once again by Hattie. Hi Hattie. So the three parts are basically looking at how we got into abusive relationships, why and how we stayed in abusive relationships. And the third video is about getting out of an abusive relationship. So if you haven't watched the first video, I suggest you check that out. And this video will be on part 2, which is staying in. So we'll be talking about how the abuser kept us in the relationship, first signs of abuse, how they kept us on side during that abuse, how we excused the abuser, why we stayed, and what our friends and family said. So we'll just jump in and get started. Welcome, Hattie. And what maybe should we start with your experience a little, and maybe what the first signs of when you thought things weren't quite what they seemed to be?
Well, he was, as I said before, he was an odd character who had told me he had autism. So there was a lot of odd behavior, which I just put into that box. Oh, he's autistic and I need to be patient. And that was the story he kept enforcing. There were various occasions where I noticed very odd behavior that I couldn't get my head around. Things like, I remember one evening, it was my friend's birthday, and I had told him that's what I was doing that night. I was going to go out with her and some friends, and I didn't necessarily invite him because it was a girlfriend and we were very close and it was like a girls' evening. But he kind of started a fight before I left for that party, and ended up coming with me, and he completely destroyed the evening by being a kind of sulking presence. And when I said to him, look, we need to talk about this tomorrow, like I have to be here for my friend tonight. And this happened quite a lot. Whenever I chose very clearly to prioritize a friend, he would say, but surely the most important thing is you and me. The most important thing in the whole world is you and me, and you're not prioritizing you and me. And made me feel very bad, like I was a bad girlfriend who didn't understand how important our love was. And that kind of behavior I put down to his insecurity at not realizing how much I loved him, and that once he realized that he would calm down. But he was trying to isolate me from my friends. He told me stories about what my friends were saying about him or about me that weren't true, to kind of separate me from them. So these were some early signs, but he had cast, to be honest, the most dark part of all of this is that I was under some spell where I really felt like I would do anything to make it work. I was really in a mindset of like, this, we are meant to be, and I will do anything to make it work. So the things like the isolating, the signs of that kind of trajectory. He was also stalking me very early on, but I was always so happy to see him. He was always popping up. These signs I thought we could handle, and I thought it was about insecurity and that I could put his mind at rest. So yes, those were like the first signs for me. What about yours, Nick?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, like how early on would you say that started?
Very early, like a month, probably 3 or 4 weeks. He was probably like, like we talked about, these relationships move so fast, and we had already like almost declared our love for each other within like 2 weeks or something ridiculous. And I felt like cemented to him very quickly. And so him saying, it made sense in a way that I should prioritize that above all else quite quickly. I mean, I didn't know about any of these patterns of abusive relationships before this, and this particular pattern won't ever happen to me again. I take everything incredibly slowly now, and it does seem crazy, but it also feels like, oh, this is what people talk about when you find the one and you just know, and it's like a fairy tale, but it's often a very bad sign that's cementing really fast. So yeah, within about a month, I would say it was starting.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, for me, I mean, I can only remember in the first, I think, 3 weeks, after 3 weeks, that she started an argument in a car that went in circles. But I suppose that was more of maybe a red flag than, you know, I guess it was manipulative to go round in circles to try and make me rethink my arguments. I obviously have a huge amount of sort of examples from during the relationship, but the first signs of actual abuse, I don't know, I've struggled a little bit to pinpoint. But if I think of some of the examples of the abuse that I suffered, which maybe comes on to the second part of how they kept us on side during that. I remember going to I remember. I remember that there were many times where I thought, you know, if we don't solve this within 3 months, things don't improve, then you know, we'll have to go our separate ways. But I do remember a very clear time when I went wakeboarding and with a friend, and she decided to stay at home, but we were going to go to her family's in the afternoon. And we went wakeboarding. We decided, I can't remember why, but decided to stay like a little bit longer. I think we got delayed there, or we didn't get there in time or something. There was no rush to get to her families that I was aware of. And I remember telling my friend to call my ex to tell her that I was running about half an hour, 45 minutes late. And I remember that and I didn't see my friend after that, but I heard afterwards that she went crazy at my friend for saying like that I was going to be late. And then when I did return home, she went crazy at me, saying that you know, how could I do it? What, you know, that I've ruined her day, that there's no point continuing the relationship. And then she literally packed her bags and basically put them in the car and was like, it's over, we can't do this anymore. And she would stay long enough for me to feel guilty and bad and confused about it, that I would say, oh, it was my fault, I'm really sorry, I should have, you know, understood that it was so important for us not to be half an hour late. And eventually she agreed that you know, she would stay, and then basically told me that I needed to take the bags out of the car and unpack them for her, which I did.
Wow.
Which I did. And then on the way, and then in the car, she still wouldn't really give up and started saying, I don't know why I do this anymore. You know, I do so much for you. What do you do for me? You don't take this seriously. You don't, you don't make any effort to make this work. And I guess it just it definitely made me doubt myself. It definitely 100%. Like I'd say that,
gaslighting, isn't it? That's hardcore gaslighting, making you doubt your experience of that situation. Yeah. And she's like turned it on its head.
Yeah, I mean, the arguments I do remember on many occasions when I wanted to go out and play football or see friends. She would tell me that I needed. It was always who are you seeing? Oh, we don't like that person. They're not nice to me or her. They're not nice to her. So if they're not nice to her, then I shouldn't see them either, because why would I be friends with someone who doesn't treat her well?
That's familiar.
Sometimes she would, if I was going out, she would start an argument over nothing, and then start crying her eyes out so that I would stay and try and solve it. And I'd be like, look, I really have to go. And she'd be like, how can you leave me like this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is all very, very familiar. That it's very controlling, gaslighty behavior.
Yeah.
That keeping track on you is, yeah. Did you ever feel that she was, I mean, it's different. I think the dynamic is so different being the victim of a woman, because the idea of, I mean, I'm sure men have suffered from women stalking them. Did you ever worry that might, I mean, obviously when you're in love with someone, you don't worry about being stalked by them, but that keeping track of you, did you ever feel that you were ever somewhere where she, like, did she always know, basically, where you were?
I don't really recollect that. Yeah, I don't really recollect that. I think, no, I don't. Maybe I volunteered it without knowing, but it wasn't something I was conscious of. But I do often I do remember like feeling, I'm not sure, I think. But
so with these patterns, like, how did she keep you? How did she? Yeah.
Yeah, it would come down to shame and guilt, I think, fundamentally. And I never knew what shame and guilt was before. And I understand now that guilt is when you think you've done something wrong, and shame is when you think you're a bad person. And it started off thinking I did things wrong. And there were a lot of times where, there were all these phrases she would ingrain into my head that I was the one doing things wrong. How could I treat her like this? Never been treated like this ever before. I've embarrassed her. I've done this. I've done that. I'm a disgusting man. Like, the list goes on. But most of the time I was very calm, and I kind of just understood that it was her that had the problem. And she always used to tell me that, oh, you should have seen me 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It was a mess. And it was this kind of, I don't know if it's unique to my situation, but she always, I mean, she played the victim massively, but she always, it was always like, I had such a hard life, I had such a tough time, and I'm really trying my best to change, and we have such great fun together, and you need to just bear with me. And I'm seeing, she's seeing a therapist, she's trying to work it out, and like, deep down, I always knew it wasn't me that was the problem, at least for the first year. So I was relaxed about it because I knew it wasn't me that was the problem. until it came too late, and I started to slowly convince myself or tell her that I was the problem to solve things. And then I started to convince myself that I was the problem. And then I started saying things like, I don't know why you continue to be with me if I'm such a bad person. You know, you deserve someone better. That's what I would say to her, because I would feel that I was, you know, such a.
She's been telling you that for a year, right? She's been telling you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the other things that made me stay in was it was definitely the good times for sure. It was when she was happy and fun. It was amazing. We had so much fun together. It was it was the friends, how she got on so well with friends and just being in that atmosphere. And I remember when she didn't want to talk to me, and she's crying on the sofa or something. I guess the victim playing the victim. It just makes you like, because when she gets so angry and upset, that's someone you don't want to be around at all. But when someone is crying and you know and then you want to kind of help them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I guess ultimately the good times always returned a few days later. And it's the hope. You just hope that things will be better, get better. I remember her therapist used to say to me that I should just focus on making her happy, and my happiness will come from the fact that she will be happy.
Your therapist said that?
Her therapist.
Oh, her therapist.
We went to her therapist together sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And actually, the smartest thing, I didn't realize this at the time, but the smartest thing she did was take me to her therapist. Because that really made me so open and so vulnerable as to my weaknesses. We were talking about my childhood and you know how I didn't really I didn't act in certain ways because of things that may or may not have happened, and or what my fears were, and that's ultimately what abuse really is at the heart of it, is understanding what someone's weaknesses are, what makes them tick, and then using that against them. And putting me into that sort of safe environment to get me to sort of say everything. While I was trying to help the situation, she was using it to completely manipulate me with it. Oh, yeah, but, it's because of this and because of that. That's why you're acting like this.
Wow. That is clever. I mean,
yeah.
I bet that happens, because that is clever. Using her position as well, like as a victim, to victimize you, and the setup that comes with that. To be honest, it's making me think about this guy was he's Jewish and very active member of the community where I was. And I've got a lot of Jewishness in my family, but not religious. So I was really intrigued. He wanted me to come to the synagogue with him, and I was really, really interested. And he was clever, because in a similar-ish way, he was being sheltered in a way by this community with whom he had, mostly were elders. And as soon as I arrived, all of these elders would come over and be like, oh, you take care of our lovely, we're so happy he's found you, like, take care of him, we love him. But the reality is he doesn't have intimate relationships with these elders. It's very easy in that kind of community to be a part of it without having strong relationships. And the reality is he didn't have any normal peer-to-peer relationships. They were all either his elders or people who somehow relied on him and like his subordinates, basically, or how he saw them. But yes, that way of using a situation to both to bolster himself in the way that she did with that therapist. She's got someone to speak on her behalf, basically, to do her dirty work in a way. And obviously they're also a victim in a way. The therapist is a victim, and this community were a victim of him as well, not in a direct way, but they were manipulated by his lies as well. So that's another reason why I brushed off red flags. It's because he seemed to have this. He was very clever in introducing me to elders who I would obviously trust and respect, and who obviously adored him, apparently. So, yeah, it's clever. It's clever.
Yeah. I also actually remember early on, she used to have her friends come and do things, which I always found a bit weird. Like, I remember we went to a house and we needed to get to back to my area, and so she called up her friend. Her friend literally got out of bed and drove us to that place. And I thought, wow, what such great friends you have. I can't think of anyone that would do that, you know?
Yeah.
And she'd be like, yeah, we do that for each other. We're a very close group of friends. And it's all like smoke and mirrors and an act, and like just all these things which are kind of over the top, and you just it kind of helps you to think that maybe these are good people. Or I remember, for example, all the time. So she would talk to me about money, and that she didn't have any money, and that that she believed in karma, and everything needed to be done in the right way, otherwise things would come back and hurt her. And I remember going to, she wouldn't pay for anything ever and go mad at me if I mentioned anything. And at one point I gave her money because she helped me to get an insurance claim, and she said that she deserves half of that money because of it. We go down to the shop one day, and we buy things, and she's basically looking at the receipt and seeing like courgettes and cucumbers, and they kind of apparently messed it up and put that we bought cucumbers when we bought courgettes. And went back and said, "Oh, look, you made a mistake. We owe you an extra £2 or whatever it is."
Wow.
£150 shop. And I would be saying this to my mum. I'd be like, "Wow, my mum would be like, yeah, but she's just after your money or whatever. She just wants money." I'm like, "No, she's not." Then we went to the shop, and like she was like, like we have to give the back.
So clever. I mean, this is something I wanted to ask you about. Is like that is so calculated, so calculated. I mean, how much of your relationship with her do you feel was calculated like that, like her behavior? I mean, to be bothered to do that, does it make you think that everything was a calculated move to make you feel something? Whether it's about her or someone else, she's wanting, every move she's making is to make you feel something. I mean, that's definitely what I experienced, but you don't often talk about it like that.
You're so ingrained with phrases that they say, or that's what I found, that I have them running through my head a lot of the time, and I wrote a lot of them down, but I still have them in my head. And there were so many triggers that, I was in the car the other day with someone, and they asked me something, why did you do this? And I instantly froze and was like, I got to get out of the car. I can't be in the car. It's just like, I'm not explaining myself. I'm sorry. I'm not getting involved in this.
Yeah.
But in terms of when I remember when we towards the end, she would say, "Oh, you know, after we broke up, or when we broke up, or if we break up, I'm sure you're going to tell the whole world about what a terrible person I am and all these horrible things I've done to you." And I would be like, "No, you know, I've got nothing bad to say about you. I think you're great. I just think it's not working." And I genuinely believed that. I genuinely believed that she just was a tortured soul and she didn't mean any of it. And it's over, I would say, well over a year and almost a half for me to actually accept and recognize, like you said, everything was calculated, everything she meant. And I think the most obvious one is when she used to say, "I will set you free," knowing that I was trapped in that relationship.
That's so creepy. That's so creepy, because I mean, you often hear, when I hear experts talking about abusers, people with kind of narcissism or disordered personalities, that when they say what they actually present to you, the actual truth is 180-degree opposite. And that's exactly what her refrain of saying she's going to set you free is like the creepiest thing I've ever heard. And like the refrain, I mean, I just want to talk a little bit about, it's quite different the situation I had in terms of the abuse. I didn't know was happening. Most of it I didn't know was happening because it was based around extraordinary lies. Like everything he said to me was a lie. He lied about his, you know, his ex-wife was dead and that he'd raised his children alone. He lied about his past career. He lied about his present career. He lied about money. Like his personality was a lie. And his refrain that he said over and over again is, "I just can't lie. I just can't lie. I can't." Right. And that was connected to this Asperger autism diagnosis that he insisted he had. So it's so creepy, these things that are repeated and repeated, and they are the things that turn out to be the absolute opposite. The absolute opposite. Really interesting. Wow.
Did you find that like your abuser was very like how would he control you? I mean, I talked a lot about mine crying and manipulating with I suppose, about the lying side of things and using elders to cover it up. And you also talked about isolating. How did he? What other ways did he isolate you?
Well, like I said, I think he. I mean, it was early on in our relationship that I discovered the extraordinary lies, and then found out this weird pattern. And like when I looked back with the knowledge of understanding abusers and comparing that to my relationship, it was things like the speed at which we met, the love bombing, which we haven't really talked about, but that certainly was a thing. He used to tell me repeatedly how he loved me. Like he told me that like 4 times a day, but he didn't say it in like a gushy way, which would have been maybe a bit off-putting. He was very clever. He said it in this almost deadpan, emotionless way. I mean, he was emotionless, but I think he saw that if he was too gushy, I wouldn't like that anyway. So, but it was constant love bombing. And the watching me and learning what I wanted and basically presenting this ideal person. I thought he was my ideal person. I thought he was, you know, and this makes me feel vulnerable because it's also reveals myself to myself, that potentially my shallowness, you know, he lied about, he not only lied about his education, like he was very highly educated. That's what he told me. It was all a lie. But he felt like an educated person. He had this like professorial kind of vibe about him, which I really liked. He kind of just saw what I wanted. He was very kind of modest. I saw him as modest and in control and like a good critical thinker and like So he created this personality that tracked, like, it was for me. He made this personality for me. So that's kind of once I was cemented in, the other stuff he managed to, like the isolating, I didn't see it as that at the time. It was only looking back with knowledge about abusers that I saw what he was up to. But yeah, the lies with the abuse, because I basically felt like I was in a relationship with someone who didn't exist in the end, because nothing was true. So I was in a relationship with a kind of empty chameleon figure. I didn't know what was inside there. But after, yeah, he did reveal the darkness after I ended it, which I knew was there by that time. Anyway, I've gone off topic a bit there.
And what about maybe about your friends and your family? What were they saying during the?
So yes, interesting that when I first met this guy, I felt completely swept off my feet. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was very anxious, actually. My body was incredibly anxious. And I actually broke it off with him very early on because I found it so intense. And I remember talking to friends and family about him. And they all said the same thing. They said, oh, for God's sake, Hattie, you are an anxious person. You just need to slow down the relationship. Just ask him to slow down, get to know him slowly, and see what happens. So, I asked him to slow down. I asked him to back off a bit. He was very obedient, did exactly what I asked. And but it's interesting because I think this is where education is really important, because if I had a friend now who came to me in the state that I was in, like high anxiety, I was completely on alert, but I thought it was love. If someone came to me in that state, I might show them like the things that I like, tell them my story and show them things that enlighten me, because I think that's a really big sign that I don't think love you're told is meant to feel like, yeah, like it sweeps you off your feet and it knocks you flat, like you're just like completely floored by this love. And I think that's actually a very disordered, abusive love that does that. So yeah, friends and family, I never blame them. Obviously, they didn't know. I would have said the same thing. But and a lot of my extended group of friends didn't like him because he was so weird. I mean, literally, he was so weird. Like if you saw him across the street, you'd be like, "Oh, look, like there's a psychopath." But he told me he was autistic, and I thought, "Oh well, I can, we can get through that together." But he managed to befriend a couple of my very close girlfriends. So he was clever. He got in with the right people. He got in. My sister met him, got in with her. She adored him. So he was strategic about who he needed to bother to make them like him. Yeah. I would say that was the situation. So I know your friends really liked your abuser, mostly, didn't they?
Yeah, nearly all of them did. She and my family too. They thought she was smart and very alert, and she was had a great job, and yeah.
Have you done much digging into? I mean, for me, finding out about the lies was the first thing, and like, I mean, are there things that you doubt looking back about her past and her achievements and her victimhood? Like,
well, I know that the main story that she told about how she was sort of owed so much money, and
yeah,
I struggle to believe that, but I think fundamentally I don't know. I don't really think about what was true and what wasn't so much. I think more just about the signs and things like this. But my what she did, which was quite smart with my friends and my family, was she kept them all on side early on, and then started to pick them away one by one, and that started with people who were a threat to her.
Mhm.
So either someone that she thought I might, for whatever reason, she was jealous with, for
Mhm.
example. And that basically culminated in her saying I couldn't hang out with any of my friends who were girls on a one-to-one basis because that's not normal, even if I'd known them for 10 years. And she was shocked and it's just wrong and it's not nice and I should never do that.
Wow.
But there were two people I could do that with, but everyone else was a definite no. Then she started picking away at friends that, like best friends, that she knew I was talking to about the struggles of the relationship
Mm.
and being like, oh, I can't believe they did this. You know, aren't they meant to be your best friends? Why would they act like that? That's not very nice of them. Over trivial things, but planting those seeds that, you know,
Yeah.
they're maybe not the people I thought they were. And with family, she just basically blocked communication with them by saying, you know, we should. That we're talking about the relationship is completely off topic with them, and we shouldn't. I shouldn't be saying anything because anything I would be saying would be negative, or she's afraid anything I said would be negative, and then they would hate her, and then why? Then she can't be with someone whose family hates her. So I can't. If I have a problem, I talk to someone else, but not my family. Um, and I remember at one point being on the video call with my sister, and she asked me something, and I literally looked up at my ex to see if how or if I could answer that question.
Oh my God. Wow.
And my
Wow.
sister noticed that and was shocked. Um, and obviously at the end of the relationship or towards the end, my my ex basically wrote down what I needed to say in a conversation with my family. Um, but uh, but ultimately, you know, I think if we kind of summarize everything, you know, the reason why I stayed was I think at the start I wanted it to work. I saw her trying to make it work with a therapist and other things. I understood she had the problem and I was fine. Um, and I think as it transitioned, um, and I thought, you know, if we fix these problems, I'm going to have the most perfect girlfriend. And
Mm.
as things transitioned, it started to be, well, it's harder to leave. It's easier to solve it than to leave. And then it became a point of being terrified of her and scared of her and actually just wanting to avoid the arguments more than anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you know, once you realize, maybe it's like like what would you say, being trained. You know, once you realize that if you apologize and say it's your fault enough, they'll sort of leave you alone. And so that's what I kept doing. And then on the other side, she would be telling me that you know, I'm the bad person, I'm the one doing things wrong, and then also saying that how did I survive without her? How could I do anything without her? I needed to keep us together. So there was a huge amount of, you know, like we say, manipulation and controlling, and just my 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 thinking was all about the relationship and no thinking about anything else. I was completely consumed with her and her reactions, her being victim and crying and the arguments. I literally, I was, I guess, on a treadmill, which was just going round and round and round, and it was moving too fast for me to even think about anything necessarily.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess that's why I stayed in, and I think ultimately, if I felt deep down that I could find someone else very easily, or don't know why would I even think like that? It's such a weird thing to say, but like, because you should be happy just on your own, and you need someone else to make you happy. But I kind of felt in that moment that if we did break up, I would never find anyone again, or anyone that was as amazing as her when she was amazing, when she was happy, and when she was nice.
And she's been telling you all along that you're like not enough, and not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. So of course then you end up feeling like you need that person to be possible. I can imagine that.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to break up with someone when it's not quite right without being manipulated. It's hard enough to choose to be alone when it's not quite right. So when you're manipulated as well, yeah, it's amazing that you got it, because a lot of people don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to sum up from your side about,
I mean, I stayed with him because I thought I was in love, and there were red flags, but I wasn't being abused. It hadn't got to that stage. I mean, I do feel like I was abused because everything was a lie, so that feels like abuse. But until I discovered everything was a lie, I didn't notice that I was being abused by. I wasn't understanding gaslighting, and everything was on reflection, and piecing together all these things, which were heading very clearly in a very bad direction. But I stayed until it was all revealed to be like that he was empty, and and the ability to lie. We'll talk about the end in the next one, but I can't tell you how frightening it is to realize that you've been intimate with someone, that you've trusted someone, you've been completely under their control, and then to discover that every single move they've made has been a lie, and a calculated lie to get something out of you. And we can talk about that in the next one. But I stayed because I thought I was in love. That's why. Yeah.
I guess that's the underlying message, by the sounds of it, that during that abusive stage is that there is a period of time, for sure, where when you're staying in, where you don't realize that you're being abused. You don't realize what's going on is wrong, or as bad as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it's all done in a very calculated way to hide it from you, and to minimize how would you say, the scale of it, or your interpretation of the scale of it, or understanding of the scale of it, all covering their tracks. Whether it's to go to the supermarket to complain about £2 to prove a different point, or taking you to the elders to show that they really are well respected, even though maybe your friends don't like them so much. It's a crazy world. Like it's mad, but
it's also important, I think, to realize that. I mean, before I had that experience, I'd heard about abusive relationships and domestic violence, and I honestly remember saying, like, I listened to the Archers with that amazing storyline, and I don't know if you heard it, but I can't remember her name, she got abused by, and I was like, well, that would never, ever happen to me. I actually said that out loud. That would never happen to me. And it's impossible to understand from the outside why people stay. But once you've been through it, it's so obvious. And what my conclusion is, it's very little to do with us. It's unfortunately running into someone who has kind of weird powers.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. I literally have divorced myself because that's how I've managed to move forward. Is I don't really think I could have done anything differently. Yeah, I think that's important to take away, is that you stay because it makes logical sense to stay, an emotional sense to stay. It's not because you're glutton for punishment. Anyway.
I think for me, and I suppose this is the point of the channel as such, is to share the experience, to make people aware of these red flags that were ignored a lot.
Yeah.
But for me, I remember in the relationship, even quite early on, I think, when she would go mad at me and even I think a couple of times like shoved me with her hands. And I remember saying to her, you know what, if you're that upset or angry with me, why don't you just hit me? Because in my mind, I was thinking, well, if she hits me, then it's abuse and then I can leave.
Right.
That's what abuse is.
Right. Yeah.
You know, fortunate thing with emotional and psychological abuse, you don't see the scars, you don't see the punches, you don't see the bruises. And therefore, if you, like in my case, I thought physical was abusive, and it was just a complete lack of understanding, knowledge, and yeah. So anyway, we'll end there, and thank you so much for joining me and talking through your experiences. Like I said, the next video will be about getting out, and the first video I've already done is about getting in. Leave in the comments below if you have shared your experience or knowledge, or if you think anything we may have missed. And thank you very much, Hattie.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.